Hey everyone, floating ventilator guy here. Welcome to my YouTube channel, or at least the very first video of the YouTube channel. And I know that a lot of the content sort of revolves around the mechanical ventilator, but I thought it was important to go over normal respiration first, or negative pressure breathing, because these are the concepts that we're going to have to build on when we start to talk about the ventilator, positive pressure breathing, and more advanced topics like worker breathing. So I don't want you to be intimidated by what I have in front of you, which is the Campbell diagram, which is off of the Deranged Physiology website, which is a great website, which you should all go read and study and try to master the content on there. But this is an important concept that I wanted to point out. So the first concept that I want to point out is that all things in biologic systems that flow on pressure gradients are under the physics law called Ohm's law. And Ohm's law is V equals IR. So V is a flow of something, whether that's electrons or tidal volume or whatever. Ohm's law is the flow of something, which flow is equal to I, and the resistance dictates how much of something will go across that gradient, whether that is air or electrons or whatever else it may be. And this is important because negative pressure breathing and positive pressure breathing depend on gradients of flow. So that's the first important concept in Ohm's law that we'll talk about more. So the second important concept is that if I drew a rudimentary alveolus, and forgive my drawing skills, and then I drew, let's say, the chest wall, and then let's say I also drew the diaphragm. I think we might remember from normal physiology that these things sort of counter each other. So the natural tendency of the chest wall is to expand outward. The natural tendency of the alveolus is to expand inward. And where these things sort of balance out at is the FRC, essentially. So the FRC is what the volume of your lung is at the end of normal expiration. So after a normal tidal volume, you breathe a normal tidal volume out. The volume of air left in the lung is FRC, and that's represented here on the Campbell diagram. You can see the FRC. You can see the FRC right here in purple. So what you see are these two lines, the elastic property of the chest wall and the elastic property of the lung. So the elastic properties of the lung want to pull a negative pressure. The elastic properties of the chest wall want to pull a positive pressure. And where these two things cross each other essentially becomes the FRC. And I think that really just the concepts are important. The numbers are sort of less important. And there'll only be a few numbers that I want you to sort of recognize. So the first number is that at the end of normal expiration, so at FRC, your intra-alveolar pressure, so the pressure within the alveolus, is pretty much close to zero. And there's pressures, intrapulmonary, transpulmonary, and these are, I think, less important. They might be important if you're taking something like step 1 or step 2 of the USMLE or other sort of basic courses, but I think the concepts are just what's the most important thing. So when you contract your diaphragm down, all of these pressures become more negative. And as a consequence of that, your chest wall expands, and because of Boyle's law, the pressure within the alveolus becomes more negative. So it goes from something like 0 to -1. And because now the pressure is -1 inside the lung, based on Ohm's law, there is a pressure gradient set up, and then flow can occur from the atmosphere, which by convention is 0, but is really just the atmospheric pressure, because your intrathoracic pressure or intraalveolar pressure is -1. So there's a gradient for flow to go from obviously 0 to -1. And then you get a total volume. You breathe out that total volume, usually passively. We don't spend a lot of metabolic energy to breathe at rest. Something like certainly less than 5% of your total metabolic oxygen consumption is spent on normal breathing, because if we spent a lot of energy to breathe just at rest, then that would be all that we could do, and sort of evolutionarily we would become easy prey for other predators, right? So we don't spend a lot of energy breathing at rest because it's not evolutionarily beneficial. You can see when you introduce things like increased airway resistance, decreased compliance through pulmonary edema, or other things, you can plot on this Campbell diagram how much more work the patient or the person will need to do to just do the fundamental work of breathing. So moving the chest wall and moving the lung. And that gets a little bit more advanced, and I didn't want to get too advanced for this sort of introductory topic, but this is an important concept to hold on to. The concept of Ohm's law, that things flow across a gradient based on a resistance, and that you're taking advantage of this with negative pressure breathing, setting up a pressure gradient that becomes ultimately negative in the alveolar space after inspiration, and taking advantage of the elastic properties of the lung to then go back to FRC passively instead of actively, which would consume more oxygen. And things that come to mind is, like, let's say a severe asthma exacerbation. You have to actively exhale to push air outward. And I think we all know when we see patients who have a bad asthma exacerbation, how that can quickly tire them out. So this was just a quick introduction to sort of normal worker breathing, the normal physiologic mechanisms. If you want more in-depth discussion, I suggest Deranged Physiology or the West Respiratory Physiology book, because these concepts we will build on when we start to talk about the mechanical ventilator. So I appreciate it, appreciate the support. Please like, comment, post, and ultimately like and subscribe to the YouTube channel as I sort of build it up. Thank you.